In 1967, you could walk into a Chevrolet dealership, sign for the most ferocious engine the company had ever bolted into a road car, and drive away with a piece of paper that lied to your face about what you just bought. The number on that paper said 430 horsepower. The truth sat closer to 550, and Chevrolet knew it. This is the story of an engine the company built to win, then deliberately disguised so almost nobody would buy it. The General Motors brass didn't underrate the L88 by accident. They did it on purpose, with intent, to keep this thing hidden in plain sight. The cruelest part isn't that they buried the real number, it's the reason they felt they had to. Only 216 people ever got one. By the time the world understood what Chevrolet had actually been selling, the window had already slammed shut. Stay with me, because the gap between what the factory claimed and what the engine truly made is one of the boldest sleights of hand in American performance history. And the men who pulled it off had a motive that, once you understand it, is almost impossible to argue with. To understand why an engine like this had to be smuggled into the world rather than celebrated, you have to understand the man who fought to build it. Because the L88 didn't come from a committee or a marketing plan. It came from one stubborn engineer's decade-long war with his own employer. His name was Zora Arkus Duntov. Born in Belgium in 1909 to Russian parents, raised between Berlin and Leningrad, he was the kind of man whose mother once begged him to give up motorcycles for the supposed safety of a car, at which point he promptly bought a racing car instead. He drove at Le Mans in the 1950s, taking class wins at the wheel of a Porsche, before joining General Motors in 1953, after laying eyes on the very first Corvette at a New York show. He found the car beautiful. He found what lay beneath it deeply disappointing. Fixing that became his life's work. Duntov spent the next 20 years as a kind of insurgent inside the corporation, a true believer in speed surrounded by executives who mostly wished the whole subject would go away. And that tension defines everything about the L88, because to grasp why Chevrolet hid its masterpiece, you first have to understand the wall Duntov spent his career trying to climb. Let's go back to the middle of the 1960s, when the horsepower war in Detroit had gone completely feral. Every division of every American carmaker was locked in an arms race measured in cubic inches. Pontiac had lit the fuse with the GTO. Ford and Chrysler were swinging back with engines that seemed to grow larger every model year. The whole industry was sprinting toward more displacement, more power, more noise. And inside Chevrolet, Duntov watched this escalation with a very particular hunger, because he had spent years convinced the Corvette could be a world beater if only the people above him would let it off the leash. That was the problem, and it wasn't an engineering problem. It was politics. Back in 1957, the Automobile Manufacturers Association, the industry's own trade body, had agreed to pull out of factory-backed racing altogether. General Motors, the largest corporation in the country, signed on enthusiastically. On paper, GM did not go racing. On paper, GM built sensible transportation for sensible families. Some historians argue the ban had less to do with any real distaste for competition than with GM's fear of antitrust regulators, a giant so dominant it worried that flexing its muscles in public might invite the government to break it apart. Whatever the reason, the effect on Duntov was suffocating. He had already watched one of his great projects, a purpose-built Corvette racer called the SS, get strangled by exactly this corporate caution. It ran once at Sebring in 1957, broke, and was never allowed to return. Just as he was building momentum, the corporation kept chopping the throttle. But Duntov was not a man who took no for a final answer. He simply learned to work in the shadows. Rather than fight the ban head-on, he kept Corvette racing alive by feeding fast parts to private teams and slipping them quiet technical help, a clandestine performance